This is a set of excerpts from the chapter called Cosmic Mind in the book Studies in Occultism, written by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. So, Blavatsky starts with what Edison has said about atoms, that let me quote from here this point: Edison's conception of matter, his personal belief about the atoms being possessed by a certain amount of intelligence. So, here, when Edison said this, that atoms were possessed by a certain amount of intelligence, he was criticized for being too imaginative. And in reply to this criticism, HPB says, imagination is again one of the strongest elements in human nature, or in the words of Dugald Stewart, it is the great spring of human activity and the principal source of human improvement. Destroy the faculty, and the condition of men will become as stationary as that of brutes. So here she defends Edison as saying that such an imagination is necessary for humans to rise themselves up from the state of brutehood. Then she says, it is the best guide, that is imagination, it is the best guide of our blind senses, without which the latter would never lead us beyond matter and illusions. The greatest discoveries of modern science are due to the imaginative faculty of the discoverers. Occultism tells us that every atom, like the monad of Leibniz, is a little universe in itself, and that every organ and cell in the human body is endowed with a brain of its own, with memory and therefore experience and discriminative power. Then goes on to say that nothing is inorganic, that is, nothing is lifeless, everything has the life principle. She says, if plants can be shown to have nerves and sensations and instinct, but another word for consciousness. So here she has defined instinct as another word for consciousness. Why not allow the same in the cells of the human body? Science divides matter into organic and inorganic bodies only because it rejects the idea of absolute life and life principle as an entity. Otherwise, it would be the first to see that absolute life cannot produce even a geometrical point or an atom inorganic in its essence. So, because this life principle or absolute life is there in every single point in this universe, nothing can be inorganic. Everything has got life. Now, she goes on to talk about one particular scientist who had said a lot of things in support of theosophy and theosophical ideas. And about him, let us see what she says. His name is Dr. Pirogov. Well, Dr. Pirogov was the very incarnation of exact sciences and method of thought, who had dissected hundreds and thousands of human organs, making himself as acquainted with the mysteries of surgery and anatomy as we are with our familiar furniture. The savant for whom physiology had no secrets. Pirogov is found after his death devoting whole chapters in his literary will to the scientific demonstration of what? Why? Of the existence in every organism of a distinct vital force, independent of any physical or chemical process, also called life principle. So he said in his literary will that there should be a scientific demonstration of this thing called the life principle, which is there in everything. The great anatomist and surgeon had the hardihood to declare in his memoirs that we have no cause to reject the possibility of the existence of organisms endowed with such properties that would make them the direct embodiment of universal mind, a perfection inaccessible to our own human mind. because we have no right to maintain that man is the last expression of the divine creative thought. So, Dr. Piragrov himself says uh, that this human mind is diffused in this entire, not human mind, the mind itself, the universal mind is diffused throughout the universe, and it's not just in our human mind. Then further quotations from his book called Memoirs, HPP quotes, his memoirs show plainly that not only he believed in universal deity, divine ideation, or the hermetic thought divine, and a vital principle, but taught all this and tried to demonstrate it scientifically. He even goes so far as to admit in these suggestive words, our reason must accept in all necessity an infinite and eternal mind which rules and governs the oceans of life, thought, and creative ideation in full agreement with the laws of unity and causation, manifests themselves plainly enough in universal life without the participation of brain slush, directing the forces and elements towards the formation of organisms. This organizing life principle becomes self sentient, self conscious, racial, or individual, substance ruled and directed by the life principle. The limitless and the eternal is not only a postulate of our mind and reason, but also a gigantic fact in itself. What would become of our ethical or moral principle were not the everlasting and integral truth to serve it as a foundation? So there's a lot here to unpack. Basically, Dr. Paragraphs in his memoirs says that there is a vital principle, which is the what governs. There is a vital principle and also an infinite and eternal mind, which which rules and governs this ocean of life, and it is in full agreement with the laws of unity and causation, which is the law of karma, and manifests itself in universal life, in which there is no brains. Even in places where there are no brains, this universal life, this universal thought and creative ideation manifests itself. So the brain is not just not necessary for thought and for ideation. Without the brain slush, as is quoted here, this the thought and creative ideation can manifest itself, and it makes organisms into self-sentient. That means self-aware, self-conscious, racial or individual. That is either as a group or as separate, and they're all ruled and directed by this life principle. So there is a life principle, there is a divine mind, and all of these, and there's divine ideation, there is a universal deity, and then in the end, he HPB says that if one did not believe that there is such a limitless, eternal, universal mind and reason, then we would not have any basis for living a moral life or a ethical life. Then she says, in reading the memoirs of that man of scientific fame, that is Dr. Pirogov, we feel proud of finding him accepting almost wholesale the fundamental doctrines and beliefs of theosophy. The progress of physiology itself, as we have said, is a sure warrant that dawn of that day when a full recognition of a universally diffused mind will be an accomplished fact is not far off. It's only a question of time. So, this concept of having a universally diffused mind, I don't think is even now so much thought of in the in the scientific world or on this thing. But we scientists today are finding more and more proof that the everything is conscious, from the atom onto the first unicellular organism. Everything has some intelligence and life in it. So I think that is very much something which scientists have discovered, and they don't seem to argue that that is a fact, that possibly there is nothing really dead in the universe is being discovered now, but that there is a universally diffused intelligence in this whole universe. I'm not sure whether that is in vogue today. Let us read further. HPP says the fact that we reject the interference of other forces in living things depend entirely on the limitations of our senses. We use indeed the same organs for our observations of both animate and inanimate nature, and these organs can receive manifestations of only a limited realm of motion. Vibrations pass along the fibers of our optic nerves to the brain, reach our perceptions through our consciousness as sensations of light and color. Vibrations affecting our consciousness, through our auditory organs, strike us as sounds. All our feelings through whichever of our senses are due to nothing but motions. So here she says the motion causes sight, motion causes hearing. There is some vibration which causes whatever we see and whatever we hear. Such are the teachings of physical science, and such were in the roughest outlines those of occultism eons and millenniums back. The difference, however, and the most vital distinction between the two teachings is this: official science sees in motion simply a blind, unreasoning force of law. Occultism, tracing motion to its origin, identifies it with the universal deity and calls this eternal, ceaseless motion the great breath. So, here, this is a fundamental uh, understanding in occultism, that motion is ceaseless in this universe. There is no such thing as the motion stopping, and that motion is called the great breath. Even when there is pralay, there is motion, and now it's Manavantra, there is motion. So, motion itself represents that great deity, that universal deity. That is what she's saying here. One discovery after the other tends in this direction. The work of some German physiologists are especially interesting with regard to cases of consciousness and positive discrimination. One is almost inclined to say thought in the amoebas. Here now she's going to discuss about amoebas, the single cellular creature called amoeba. Now the amoebas or animalculae are, as all know, microscopial protoplasms. As the Vampyrella cirrhogaea, for instance, so this is the name of one amoeba, Vampyrella cirrhogaea, a most simple elementary cell, a protoplasmic drop, formless and almost structureless, and yet it shows in its behavior something for which zoologists, if they do not call it mind and power of reasoning, will have to find some other qualification and coin a new term. This amoeba called Vampyrella cirrhogaea seems to have a mind and a power of reasoning. For see what Sikowski, I think is another scientist, says of it. Speaking of this microscopial bare reddish cell, it describes the way in which it hunts for and finds among a number of other aquatic plants one called Spirogyra, rejecting every other food. Examining its peregrinations under a powerful microscope, he found it, when moved by hunger, first projected its pseudopode, that is, false feet, by the help of which it crawls. Then it commences moving along until, among a great variety of plants, it comes across a Spirogyra, after which it proceeds towards the cellulated portions of one of the cells of the latter. and placing itself on it, it busts the tissues, sucks the content of one cell, and then passes on to another, repeating the same process. This naturalist, that is a scientist, never saw it take any other food, and it never touched any of the numerous plants placed by Blavatsky in its way, mentioning another amoeba. So here, so far, he discussed about this Vampirillus spirugyra, that it only ate this one kind of aquatic plant called the spirugyra, in which it actually went to one particular cell, and it took all the nutrients of that cell and then went to another cell. It actually chose. It's not eating anything that comes in its way. It is choosing what it wants to eat. Then talks about another amoeba, the Pulpa della Pugnax. He says that he found it showing the same predilection for Chlamydomonas, on which it feeds exclusively. Having made a puncture in the body of the Chlamydomonas, it sucks its chlorophyll, then goes away, he writes, adding these significant words. The way of acting of these monads during their search for and reception of food is so amazing that one is almost inclined to see them in them consciously acting beings. So even this scientist found, when he was examining these another type of amoebas, that who are eating one type of food called chlamydomonas, in which it is sucking the chlorophyll out of it, that it is choosing, and it's conscious, and it is an intelligent being, this tiny one-celled amoeba. Not less suggestive are the observations of W. Engelman on the arcella, another unicellular organism, only a trifle more complex than Vampirilla. He shows them in a drop of water under a microscope on a piece of glass, lying, so to speak, on its back, that is, on its convex side, so that the pseudopode projecting from the edge of the shell find no hold in space and leave the amoeba helpless. So you can imagine like a cup-like shape which is lying on top of the glass vessel in which the scientist is studying this amoeba. This cup-like shape is this amoeba, and all its edges are towards the air. So its edges are the ones which grab the sides and move. But because it is like in a cup shape where the whole edges are up, it is helpless. So it is not able to move. Under these circumstances, the following curious fact is observed. Under the very edge of one side of the one of under the very edge of one of the sides of the protoplasm, gas bubbles begin immediately to form, which makes that side lighter, allowing it to be raised, bringing at the same time the opposite side of the creature into contact with the glass, thus furnishing its pseudo or false feet, means to get hold of the surface, and that by turning over its body to raise itself on all its pseudopodae. Just imagine what the scientist has observed. That this cup-like formation of amoeba is lying on the glass sheet below. What it does is it makes one side of it lighter by developing gas bubbles in it, so that one side of it rises up fully. When one side of it rises up fully, the other side touches the glass base, and then it overturns, and now it is able to move on that glass surface with its false feet, this pseudopode. After this, the amoeba proceeds to suck back into itself the glass bubbles. So it sucks back the glass bubbles and begins to move. If like a light drop of water is placed on the lower extremity of the glass, then following the law of gravity, the amoeba will find themselves at first at the lower end of the drop of water. Failing to find there a point of support, they proceed to generate a large bubble of gas. When becoming lighter than the water, they raise up to the surface of the drop. In the words of Engelman, if having reached the surface of the glass, they find no more support for their feet than before. Forthwith, one sees the glass globules diminishing on one side and increasing in size and number on the other side, or both, until the creature reaches the edge of the shell, the surface of the glass, and are enabled to turn over. So, this small amoeba is trying every way to turn over. It is in a way, all its edges are upturned and it will develop glass bubbles on one side or on the other side or on both sides and somehow turn over. No sooner is this done then the globules disappear. So the purpose of developing those glass globules is only to turn itself over. So as soon as it is done that, the glass globules disappear and the arcellae begin crawling. Detach them carefully by means of a fine needle from the surface of the glass and thus bring them down once more to the lower surface of the drop of water, and forthwith they will repeat the same process, varying its details according to necessity and devising new means to reach their desired aim. Try as much as you will to place them in uncomfortable positions, and they find means to extricate themselves from them, each time by one device or the other. And no sooner have they succeeded than the glass bubbles disappear. It is impossible not to admit that such facts as these point to the presence of some psychic process in the protoplasm. So, this scientist has experimented with various things with this amoeba. He's added water to it, it's given it different problems, and each time the amoeba finds a solution of how to start moving by developing these glass bubbles in different parts and trying to turn itself. Each time it solves itself. So he says that without a mind, without a thinking process, it is impossible to explain this ability of this amoeba. So this amoeba has a thinking process. Now we go on to another part. Here we are talking about the intestinal cells of our digestive tract, and here she will tell about that part. So far this whole uh, chapter is dealing with what is she calls a cosmic mind with a K, a cosmic mind, which is the diffused intelligence which is there in the whole universe. And the way she's gone about this talking about this topic is by starting with the smallest biological creature, which is the amoeba, and then she goes on to human cells, and she says when this intelligence is there in an amoeba too, found by so many scientists. So this is what she has discussed in in this book, in this chapter. So let's look at what she says about intestinal cells. The whole body of man are composed of cells, and these cells are now being recognized as individual organisms. And Queen Sabe, Queen Sabe is the word means what do you say? And Queen Sabe will come perhaps to be recognized someday as an independent race of thinkers inhabiting the globe called man. So someday it may be proved that each of these souls, each of these cells are individual race of thinkers who are in the planet called man. It really looks like it. For was it not hitherto believed that all the phenomena of assimilation and sucking in food by the intestinal canal could be explained by the laws of diffusion and endosmosis? And now, alas, physiologists have come to learn that the action of the intestinal canal during the act of absorbing is not identical with the action of the non-living membrane in the dialyzer. It is now well demonstrated that that is this wall of the intestine, is covered with epithelium cells, each of which is an organism per se, a living being with very complex functions. We know further that such a cell assimilates food by means of active contractions of its protoplasmic body in a manner as mysterious as that which we notice in the independent amoeba and animalcules. We observe that the intestinal epithelium of the cold-blooded animals and how these cells project shoots, pseudopodae, that is false feet, out of their contractive bare protoplasmic bodies, which pseudopodae or false feet fish out of the food, drops of fat, suck them into their protoplasm, and send it further towards the lymph duct. The lymphatic cells issuing the nests of the adipose tissue and squeezing themselves through the epithelium cells up to the surface of the intestines absorbs therein the drop of fat loaded with their prey travel homeward to the lymphatic canals. So long as this active work of the cells remain unknown to us, the fact that while the globules of fat penetrated through the walls of the intestine into lymphatic channels, the smallest of the pigmented grains introduced into the intestines did not do so, remained unexplained. But today we know that this faculty of selecting that special food, of assimilating the useful and rejecting the useless and the harmful, is common to all unicellular organisms. So here now she is drawing the parallel. Initially she explained how the Vampirilla Syringaira only selected the Spirogyra to eat. Okay, or another amoeba which selected another type of cell, clamod something, from which it took out chlorophyll and sucked it. Later, she finds how these amoebas are given challenges and they still find ways to turn themselves and move. And now she says this our intestines have got these epithelial cells which behave like these amoebas. They are unicellular organisms and they are able to choose what they want to eat and what they don't want to eat. So they take out, for example, the drops of fat, suck them into the protoplasm, and send it to the lymph duct. These lymph ducts also move and also absorb these fat cells and move through the body. So, all of this work is done by tiny unicellular creatures which are there in our intestines, which are making choices. So, this is what is she is showing. And the lecturer queries why, if this discrimination in the selection of food exists in the simplest and most elementary of cells, in the formless and structureless protoplasmic drops, why it should not exist also in the epithelium cells of our intestinal canal. So, here, so far, this whole intestinal canal was in cold blooded animals. So, it has been discovered in cold blooded animals. By the same analogy, the same thing must be happening even in our intestinal canals. So far it was not about our intestinal canals; it was about animals. But the scientist says that if this happens in the animal's intestine, it should happen in our intestine because the same cells are there in our intestine. Then she says, indeed, if the vampirilla recognizes its so much beloved Spirogyra among hundreds of other plants as shown above, why should not the epithelium cell sense, choose, and select its favorite drop of fat from a pigmented grain? But we will be told that sensing, choosing, and selecting pertain only to reasoning beings, at least to the instinct of more structured animals than is the protoplasmic cell outside, outside or inside man. So this faculty of sensing something, choosing something, selecting something cannot be something which a cell can do, is what we think. But it's not the case. A cell itself is doing all these things. Among hundreds of accusations against Asiatic nations of degrading superstitions based on crass ignorance, there exists no more serious denunciation than that which accuses and convicts them of personifying and deifying the chief organs of in the human body. Indeed, do not we hear these benighted fools of Hindus speak of the smallpox as a goddess, thus personifying the microbes of variolic virus. of the variolic virus. We do not read about tantrikas, a sect of mystics giving proper names to nerves, cells. Do we not read about tantrikas, a sect of mystics giving proper names to nerves, cells, and arteries, connecting and identifying various parts of the body with deities? Endowing functions and physiological processes with intelligence and whatnot. The vertebrae, fibers, ganglia, the cord, etc., of the spinal cord column, the heart and its four chambers, auricle and ventricle, valves and the rest, stomach, liver, lungs, and spleen. Everything has its special deific name, is believed to act consciously and to act under the potent will of the yogi, whose head and heart are the seats of Brahma, and the various parts of whose body are all the pleasure grounds of this or another deity. So here she says that the Hindus, the Tantrics believe that every part of their body, every organ is a seat of some deity. The goddess of moisture, the Greek and Latin nymph or lymph, then, is fabled in India as being born from the pores of one of the gods, whether the ocean god Varuna, or a minor river god, is left to the particular sect and fancy of the believers. But the main question is that the ancient Greeks and Latins are thus admittedly known to have shared the same superstitions as the Hindus. This superstition is shown in their maintaining to this day that every atom of matter in all the four or five elements is an emanation of an inferior god or goddess, himself or herself, in an earlier emanation from a superior deity. And moreover, that each of these atoms, being Brahma, one of whose name is Anu or atom, no sooner is emanated than it becomes endowed with consciousness, each of its kind, free will acting within the limits of law. Now he who knows the cosmic Trimurti, Trinity, composed of Brahma the creator, Vishnu the preserver, and Shiva the destroyer, is a most magnificent and scientific symbol of the material universe and its gradual evolution. So basically, what she's saying here is that the mind and consciousness is there in every atom, and in the Hindus give a distinct name to what exists inside the body. So let me continue that line. Okay, so here, so this, let's continue reading. And who finds a proof of this in the etymology of the names of their deities, plus the doctrines of Gupta Vidya or esoteric knowledge? Know also how to correctly understand the superstition. The five fundamental titles of Vishnu, added to that of Anu, atom, common to all the Trimurtic personages, are Bhutatman, one with the creator or emanated materials of the world; Pradhanatman, one with the senses; Paramatman, supreme soul; and Atman, cosmic soul or universal mind, show sufficiently what the ancient Hindus meant by endowing with mind and consciousness every atom, giving it a distinct name of a god or goddess. Place their pantheon, composed of 30 crores or 300 million of deities, within the macrocosm, the universe, or inside the microcosm, man, and the number will not be found overrated, since they relate to atoms, cells, and molecules of everything that is. I think this is very fascinating for any Hindu, Indian, the mystery of what these 30 crore deities are all about. And she says that these 30 crore deities are there inside every cell and molecule, of our body, as they are outside in the universe. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and please read the whole article to understand this better.